The first thing Owen Masters noticed when he woke up was the blistering heat radiating from his own skin. The second thing he noticed was the looming, bug-eyed face of an alien doctor peering at him anxiously with a clipboard in one hand and what looked suspiciously like a turkey baster in the other. "You are dying," the alien said. Voice a series of musical chirps that the translator hanging by Owen's ear rendered into English. "We are very sorry." Owen groaned and tried to sit up, but his muscles felt like wet noodles. "I'm not dying," he croaked. "I just have a fever." "Happens all the time." The alien, who had introduced himself earlier as Medic First Class Drexel, shook his head violently. "Temperature exceeds survivable limits. Organ failure imminent. We have summoned the Death Minister." Owen squinted. "The what now?" Before Drexel could explain, a second alien burst into the sterile white room, trailing a long black robe behind him and carrying what looked like a very ornate shovel. Owen flinched back against the bed. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. No need for the Grim Reaper cosplay," he wheezed. "Just get me some soup and let me take a nap." Drexel hesitated, glancing at the Death Minister, who was already solemnly preparing the shovel by polishing it with a cloth that shimmered in strange colors. Drexel's skin flushed a worried shade of lavender. "You request nourishment? In your condition?" Drexel asked. "Yeah," Owen said, coughing into his elbow. "Chicken noodle if you got it. Maybe some crackers too." Drexel hurriedly tapped on his communicator. Owen sagged back against the pillow, his body shivering uncontrollably despite the heat radiating off him. The bed was far too firm, the lights too bright, and the air smelled faintly of burnt rubber. While he waited, he tried to remember how he'd gotten here. He'd been on a diplomatic mission with a handful of other humans to the planet Veltrax 9, a mostly peaceful outpost known for its medical research. Somewhere between a cultural feast and a tour of their gardens, Owen had started feeling dizzy. Then he'd blacked out. Now he was stuck in what he assumed was their version of an emergency room, being evaluated by creatures that apparently thought a fever meant he was seconds from death. A small, round alien scurried into the room carrying a silver tray. On it was a steaming bowl that smelled vaguely of chicken, a spoon that resembled a tiny snow shovel, and a cup of what he hoped was water. Owen grinned weakly. "You guys really pulled through." Drexel watched in horror as Owen slowly sat up and began spooning the broth into his mouth. The Death Minister paused mid-polish, staring at Owen like he was a ghost. "You must not exert yourself," Drexel warned. "Your internal systems are collapsing." "I'm telling you," Owen said between sips, "this is normal. Humans get fevers all the time. It's how our bodies fight off infection." The translator struggled with infection, rendering it as body betrayal event. But Drexel seemed to grasp the general idea. "You fight yourselves?" Drexel asked, horrified. "Not exactly," Owen said. "Our immune system fights germs, bacteria, viruses." Drexel turned to the Death Minister and whispered frantically. The Death Minister looked deeply offended, wrapped his shovel in the glittering cloth, and stomped out of the room. Owen finished the soup, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and slumped down, utterly exhausted. "Now," he mumbled, "I'm gonna take that nap. Wake me up in a few hours." Drexel hovered uncertainly. "Monitoring will continue. Should we prepare for resurrection protocols?" "No resurrection needed," Owen said, already half asleep. "Just some rest." When Owen woke again, the room was dimmer, and a different alien hovered nearby taking notes on a glowing tablet. Drexel sat slumped in a chair, his eyes drooping. Owen stretched carefully. His body still ached, but the fever had broken. He was soaked in sweat, and the sheets were damp and uncomfortable. "Hey," he rasped. "Mind getting me some dry sheets?" Drexel shot upright, alarmed. "You are not deceased." "Still breathing," Owen said, giving a tired thumbs up. "Told you. Fevers are rough but not fatal for us unless it gets crazy high." "We measured 103 units," Drexel said, voice trembling. Owen laughed weakly. 103 degrees Fahrenheit? "Yeah, that's high but not lethal. You start worrying when it hits like 106. Drexel looked like Owen had just claimed he could survive being set on fire. Your species, Drexel whispered, is impossible. Adaptable, Owen corrected, struggling to sit up. We're weird, but we make it work. Before Drexel could respond, a loud klaxon sounded in the hallway. A female voice barked orders over the intercom. Medical emergency in docking bay 6. Immediate response required. Drexel scrambled to his feet. I must attend. Will you survive unattended? I'll be fine, Owen said. Just, if you find a blanket that doesn't feel like sandpaper, I'd appreciate it. Drexel hesitated, then darted from the room, leaving Owen alone once more. He swung his legs off the bed carefully, testing his balance. His muscles protested, but he managed to stand. He stripped the sweaty sheets off the bed, found a clean set in a cabinet across the room, and painstakingly remade the bed before collapsing back onto it. As he dozed, he thought about how differently Veltraxians must view life and death. For Drexel and the others, a fever was a death sentence. For humans, it was often just an annoying hurdle. He wondered how many other misunderstandings were lurking out there, waiting to trip up intergalactic relations. Hours later, Drexel returned, looking exhausted but triumphant. The patient survived, Drexel said proudly. We used what you called chicken noodle tactics. Owen chuckled weakly. You gave someone soup? And a nap, Drexel said, beaming. Good call, Owen said. Sometimes that's all you need. Drexel sat beside the bed, pulling out his tablet. We have updated our medical protocols for humans. Fever now categorized as critical but recoverable. Glad I could help, Owen said, yawning. You have saved lives, Drexel said solemnly. Despite your body's betrayal. Owen closed his eyes. It's what we do. For the first time since arriving, he felt a little less alone. The next morning, if you could call it that, on a planet where the sun pulsed lazily and refused to set properly, Owen awoke to find a small crowd of Veltraxians gathered around his bed. They held various instruments, some that buzzed, others that gurgled, and were quietly arguing among themselves in their musical language. Owen blinked blearily at them, throat dry and head pounding, and rasped, I feel like I've been hit by a hover barge. The nearest Veltraxian, a tall one with a narrow violet crest running from forehead to spine, leaned in. You are still experiencing post-fever trauma? No, Owen muttered, shifting to sit up. This is just what dehydration feels like. Another Veltraxian, shorter and with green-tinted skin, scribbled furiously on a holographic notepad. The device floated beside him, translating their notes into a language Owen couldn't read. The violet-crested one placed a small, shimmering cube on Owen's lap. This is hydrosol nutrient compound. It will restore your internal liquid balance. Owen eyed the cube suspiciously. You don't have water? Just plain water. The aliens exchanged glances. The greenish one stepped forward. Water is insufficient for systemic restoration. Our compound contains optimal electrolytic ratios. Owen sighed. Fine, he said, popping the cube into his mouth. It was like chewing a lemon-flavored sponge soaked in battery acid. He gagged, coughed, and tried not to spit it out in front of them. Is the absorption proceeding adequately? The violet-crested one asked, antennae twitching. Owen swallowed with difficulty. Next time, just give me water and some salt crackers. The Veltraxians huddled again, whispering urgently. Owen swung his legs off the bed and stood. The room tilted slightly, but he steadied himself, waving off the aliens' outstretched hands. I'm good. Just need to move around. The greenish one, who introduced himself as Specialist Yurev, looked skeptical. You should remain in static positioning to prevent structural disintegration. Owen rubbed his face. I'm not going to fall apart. Humans need to move after being sick. It's how we rebuild strength. Yurev tapped his notepad nervously. Exercise post-trauma? Yeah. Light activity, Owen said, taking a few careful steps. Walking is good. Maybe some stretching. The violet-crested one, whose name turned out to be Chief Examiner Sol Rix, trailed behind him like an anxious parent. We have never observed such recklessness post-critical event. Owen chuckled hoarsely. It's not reckless. It's recovery. He made it halfway across the room before a low, musical alarm sounded. Instantly, half the Veltraxians whipped out what looked like paddles and started charging them ominously. Whoa! Owen said, holding up his hands. False alarm. I'm just dizzy, not dying. Sol Rix hesitated, then signaled for the others to lower their paddles. Owen could feel their collective tension pressing down on him like a weighted blanket. Maybe you guys should update your medical database, he said, leaning heavily against the wall. Humans don't shatter like glass if we stand up too fast. We must recalibrate our understanding, Yurev admitted. Your physiology is defiant. Owen grinned weakly. You're not wrong. Hours later, after a long and cautious walk around the medical wing under Solrix's watchful gaze, Owen was allowed to return to his room. They'd given him a new set of clothes, soft, light, and a pale shade of blue that made him feel like a hospital escapee. At least they weren't damp. As he flopped onto the cot, another alien entered. This one was shorter, broader, and wore a sash laden with glittering pins. His skin was a deep indigo, and his eyes had a faint golden ring around the pupils. I am Director Vri, he said, bowing formally. I oversee integrative biological studies. Owen sat up straighter. Pleasure. Owen Masters. Vri nodded solemnly. It has come to our attention that your species possesses resilience traits we failed to catalog. You could say that, Owen said, scratching the back of his head. We're pretty stubborn about staying alive. Vri studied him intently. Would you consent to a controlled trial? Owen frowned. What kind of trial? Observation under varying environmental stresses, Vri said, to better understand your thresholds. You're asking if you can. Poke me with sticks and see how much I can take. If that is the human colloquialism, Vri said gravely, then yes. Owen laughed, then winced as it pulled at his sore ribs. I'll think about it. Maybe after I stop feeling like boiled spaghetti. Vri inclined his head. We await your readiness. He turned to leave, then paused. There is a matter requiring urgent clarification. Owen raised an eyebrow. Shoot. Your request for chicken noodle has sparked confusion among our culinary engineers. They have prepared 3,000 variations. None have been deemed satisfactory. Owen blinked. 3,000. We lack comprehensive understanding of noodle and chicken parameters, Vri said. Definitions vary across your historical records. Owen chuckled despite himself. Tell them to boil some pasta, throw in some sliced fowl, add broth, salt, and carrots. Keep it simple. Vri made a note on a sleek device. We shall attempt this simple formulation. After he left, Owen lay back, hands folded behind his head. His body still ached, but it was a manageable ache, the kind that told him he was on the mend. Several hours later, just past what would have been evening back home, Drexel returned carrying a steaming bowl. A cautious smile played along his mandible lines. We present the closest approximation. Owen sat up eagerly. The broth was clear and fragrant with recognizable chunks of meat and thin, curly pasta. He took a tentative sip. It was not bad. A little heavy on the salt, and the chicken had a slightly gamey aftertaste that suggested it might have had 6 legs while alive, but it was warm and comforting. Tell your cooks they're getting close, he said, digging in. Drexel beamed. We have documented over 800 human recovery foods. This has been added as primary option. Owen laughed, a real laugh this time, and it felt good. Glad I could contribute to intergalactic medicine, he said between mouthfuls. Drexel hesitated, then perched on the edge of a nearby chair. There is much we do not understand about your species. You and me both, Owen said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Sometimes being human feels like trying to fix a spaceship with duct tape and hope. Drexel tilted his head. You repair spacecraft with adhesive? Owen grinned. Only when we're desperate. Drexel made another furious note on his tablet. Later that night, or whatever passed for night, on Veltrax 9, Owen lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His fever was gone, his muscles were slowly regaining strength, and he was starting to feel like himself again. But questions churned in his mind. How many other things did these aliens misunderstand about humans? If a simple fever had triggered a death vigil, what would happen if someone broke a bone? Or had an allergic reaction? He shuddered to think. The next morning, Owen was summoned to a conference room. It was a sleek, sterile place with walls that shifted color based on the number of occupants. Right now, it pulsed a gentle teal. Vree, Solrix, Drexel, and a handful of other Veltraxians sat around a large oval table. Owen was the only human. Vree stood. We have called this assembly to propose a formal partnership. Owen blinked. Partnership. In exchange for your knowledge of human physiological resilience, Vree said, we offer access to our advanced regenerative therapies. Owen rubbed the back of his neck. You want me to teach you how humans survive things? Instruct, demonstrate, and assist in developing protocols. Vree confirmed. Owen leaned back in his chair, considering. He wasn't a doctor, he was technically part of the diplomatic corps, but he knew enough to describe basic first aid, survival tactics, and how humans handled injuries. Could be fun, he said finally. But no more death shovels, okay? Vree looked confused. Death shovels? You know, the shiny thing your minister brought to my bedside? There was a murmur around the table. Solrix looked embarrassed. It is ceremonial, he said. Symbolic preparation for life transition. Let's skip that next time, Owen said dryly. Vree made a mark on his device. Ceremonial instruments not to be presented to humans unless specifically requested. Owen chuckled. Fair enough. He glanced around the table at the eager, curious faces of the Veltraxians. Despite the misunderstandings, despite the awkwardness, he could see they genuinely wanted to learn. And weirdly enough, he wanted to teach them. All right, he said, standing. Let's get started. As the room shifted to a vibrant gold in response, Owen couldn't help but think. If this was the future of diplomacy, humanity might actually stand a chance out here. Owen sat at the head of the makeshift classroom, a large, slightly sticky whiteboard behind him covered in wobbly diagrams of human anatomy. It had taken 3 whole Veltraxian days to convince the aliens that no, humans did not have internal coolant sacs and that sweating, while unpleasant, was supposed to happen. In front of him, about 20 Veltraxians perched on hovering stools, their notepads glowing faintly. Their faces were a mixture of intense focus and barely contained horror. All right, Owen said, tapping a marker against the board. Today's topic, injuries that look bad but aren't actually emergencies. A ripple of uneasy chirps spread through the group. Drexel raised one thin, gray hand. Yes, Drexel? This is distinct from mortal trauma? Drexel asked, cautious. Exactly. Humans can bleed a lot from small cuts. It looks dramatic, but most of the time it's fine if you clean it and cover it. Specialist Rev shifted uncomfortably. Hemorrhaging without immediate containment leads to cessation. For you guys, maybe? For us, not necessarily, Owen said. Our blood clots. It seals the wound. He picked up a small plastic knife from the table and nicked the tip of his finger. A collective gasp filled the room. Demonstration, Owen said calmly, holding up the tiny bleeding cut. Watch. Several Veltraxians leaned forward as if studying a dangerous creature in a cage. The bleeding slowed, a bead of blood forming and darkening. Coagulation, Owen explained. Body's natural repair system. Chief Examiner Solrix scribbled frantically. Is the fluid self-intelligent? No, it's just chemistry. Platelets stick together, form a plug. Vree, seated stiffly at the side of the room, looked deeply unsettled. This biological autonomy is alarming. You get used to it, Owen said, wiping his finger on a sterile cloth. It's messy but efficient. Another hand went up. This time it was a slender Veltraxian named Tilex who had been unusually quiet. If a human sustains skeletal inversion, Tilex said hesitantly, will they also recover unaided? Owen blinked. Skeletal inversion? Tilex made a twisting motion with his hands. You mean a broken bone? Tilex nodded vigorously, his crest fluttering. Depends on the break, Owen said. Some fractures heal with a cast. We immobilize the bone so it can knit back together. At the word knit, half the aliens recoiled as if Owen had said he sprouted extra limbs. We don't regrow bones, Owen clarified. We just heal the existing ones. Slowly, Solrix raised a hand, tapping his notepad nervously. How long is slow? 6 to 8 weeks, usually. There was a stunned silence. Even the room lights dimmed slightly, reacting to the mood. You remain compromised for that duration? Drexel asked, incredulous. Yeah. We use crutches, splints, slings. We get around. Owen grinned. Humans are stubborn. We limp before we sit still. Several Veltraxians exchanged glances laden with what Owen could only interpret as deep cultural concern. Vree finally spoke, voice low. Your species seems designed to endure rather than avoid harm. That's not wrong, Owen said. We adapt. Fast. He glanced around the room, sensing their struggle to reconcile their medical doctrines with the chaotic resilience he was describing. Look, he said, setting down the marker. You guys have amazing tech. You fix things before they break. Humans. We break. Then we fix ourselves. Through suffering, Yurev added in a near whisper. Through persistence, Owen corrected gently. A chime sounded, indicating the mid-session break. Veltraxians stood hesitantly, whispering among themselves as they drifted toward the refreshment dispensers. Solrix lingered behind, his long fingers drumming a complicated pattern against his notepad. You are not disturbed by your own fragility? He asked finally. Owen considered. It's part of life. Getting hurt, getting better. It makes us tougher. Solrix stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly and joined the others. After the break, Owen introduced basic human first aid techniques. How to clean wounds, immobilize limbs, recognize shock. He demonstrated wrapping a bandage around Tilex's forearm, careful not to actually injure him. And the Veltraxians took meticulous notes, their hands moving in synchronized patterns. Hours passed like this, the group growing bolder with their questions. What happens if multiple traumas occur simultaneously? Yurev asked. We prioritize, Owen said. Airway, breathing, circulation. If you can't breathe, nothing else matters. Survival triage, Vree said thoughtfully. Exactly. As the session wound down, Drexel approached Owen with a small, flat device. We have compiled your teachings into an emergency manual, he said proudly. We call it the Human Durability Codex. Owen laughed, taking the device. Catchy. It will be distributed to all Veltraxian stations housing human visitors, Drexel added. Glad I could help make the universe a little safer for my kind, Owen said, genuinely touched. Later that evening, after a long meal of something that resembled roasted squash and a nap in a real bed instead of a medical cot, Owen was summoned to the administrative dome. Vree awaited him there, flanked by a small delegation. The walls pulsed a soft green, signaling formality. We wish to recognize your contributions, Vree said, producing a slim, shimmering plaque. You have expanded our understanding and averted future catastrophes. Owen took the plaque carefully. It was surprisingly heavy, etched with symbols he couldn't read but instinctively understood were respectful. Thanks, he said. Really? Vree inclined his head. Additionally, we request your assistance in one final matter. Owen tensed slightly. What's that? Vree gestured toward a small transport hovering nearby. A human visitor has arrived. She exhibits physical distress consistent with your described minor injuries. Our medics are uncertain how to proceed. Lead the way, Owen said, pocketing the plaque. They arrived at a side wing where a young woman sat on a bench, cradling a bandaged ankle. She wore a jumpsuit bearing the insignia of the diplomatic corps. Twisted it coming off the shuttle, she said, grimacing as Owen knelt beside her. Classic, he said. Looks like a sprain. You'll live. The Veltraxians huddled behind him, peering anxiously. Rest, ice, compression, elevation, Owen said, checking the bandage. She needs to stay off it for a few days. Solrix carefully noted each step. Can she still consume sustenance? Rev asked. Absolutely. Just keep her foot up when she eats, Owen said, smiling. The woman laughed weakly. First day and I'm already a medical case study. Welcome to Veltrax 9, Owen said, helping her onto a small floating stretcher. As they guided her toward a recovery room, Drexel approached, a rare glint of humor in his multifaceted eyes. You are now an honorary first response advisor, he said. Does it come with hazard pay? Owen quipped, earning a ripple of delighted chirps. By the time the stars thickened overhead, Owen sat outside the medical wing, legs stretched out, the cool night air brushing his face. He watched Veltraxians moving between buildings, their graceful strides unhurried, their chatter musical. Somewhere nearby, a kitchen worker was trying to replicate human mashed potatoes, judging by the smell. Owen leaned back against the bench, hands behind his head. Not bad for a guy who just wanted some soup and a nap. Above him, the sky shimmered with unfamiliar constellations, and for the first time in weeks, he felt completely at ease. Everything that needed fixing was fixed. Everyone who needed understanding had found it. He closed his eyes, and for once, let the universe spin without him trying to hold it together.